Hey everyone, this is Pete at Centennial Gardens. Happy Friday. This is my third season returning as a student intern here, and I'm actually taking care of the edible garden space. I wanted to take the time with this blog post to show you some of the vegetables that I've been growing, as well as some tips and tricks on how to keep your garden happy and healthy throughout the summer season. So getting started here, we actually have our herb garden bed, which has some basil, spearmint, peppermint, Italian oregano, cilantro, and some sage on the right side there. So I've actually looked up a few Italian recipes and gotten my cooking on, but I've also dried some of the peppermint leaves and used that as a tea, which was very delicious, and I recommend it at home. It's not too difficult to do. Most of these plants grow very fast. They require full sun and somewhat good draining soil, but like I said, they grow pretty well, and we've actually used some clippings of the basil in particular to propagate in some of our workshop classes. So moving on, we have some seeded arugula in this bed. We harvested a few weeks ago, and I wanted to get another round going before the fall season started. And then on the left side we have leeks seeded, and hopefully those will pop up in the next few days here. So moving on, we have radish in both of these next two beds here. So these took probably a couple weeks to get started, and I'll probably harvest in a week or so. I just wanted to get a close-up of the radish there. So once they start peeking out their heads, they're almost ready to go. And if you let them go too long, they might get too bitter. So just something to note. In this next bed here, we have kohlrabi. This is the Brassica oleracea that was bred to have an enlarged stem, and that's actually the part that we eat. So this is actually related to kale. Some other examples are broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. Cool thing about this is the genetics were all the same, but it was actually cultivated to enhance different parts of the plant. Now onto the left of that, we have some carrots growing. I'm sure people have seen or noticed the foliage on these guys. And we have two different varieties, one in which is purple, and then another one which is orange. Here's one of the purple varieties. Yeah, that's looking really good. Very nice. So those have been growing probably for a couple months now. And depending on when you want to harvest the size, you can get baby carrots in probably a few weeks. And then big old carrots probably before the fall season starts. Now moving on, right next to the kohlrabi is a genetic twin, I should say, is some kale. Now the variety that I picked out has this very cool pattern that is quite aesthetically pleasing. You might have seen this before. This is actually called Savoy, S-A-V-O-Y. Look that up if you're interested by it. There's a lot of different green varieties that can come in this type of pattern. Kale, as most people know, is one of the healthiest vegetables that you can eat. It's full of antioxidants and nutrients. Now to the left of that, hopefully my shadow doesn't block too much, but we have Swiss chard here. Now this Swiss chard grows pretty fast. It's a big leafy green that's quite bitter. It has a very savory taste. Not many people like it, but I have heard it's also full of antioxidants. And the reason why I picked out this variety is for that really vibrant red color. It's very nice on the eye, and the more it grows on, it actually turns into a darker purple. I'm sure you can see that there. And then moving on, we have our beds full of peppers. We have a few different varieties here. The one that I'm highlighting right now is called King of the North. And this is a sweeter pepper variety. So you can see, let's get in there. There's a nice one. So these are still a little immature, and those are actually going to grow into probably a more red color. And fun fact, I mean, peppers that you see in the store that are green, orange, yellow, red, they're actually the same variety. Well, and it depends, but a lot of them, like the bell pepper, are the same variety. It just depends on when you harvest it to maximize that color. So we can actually see that firsthand with this next pepper variety that I have. It's called the Aurora pepper. And the immature color is that nice, vibrant purple. And then as it grows on, you can see it change from yellow to orange to a nice, vibrant red. Now I'd watch out because these are on the spicy side. I didn't expect them to be as spicy. But that being said, it's great for salsas to mix in there to give it some extra heat and lovely color. So in these next beds are more King of the North peppers. These guys get really big. The reason why they aren't bigger actually is because the rabbits loved munching on them. That's why we have the fence up. And ever since the fence was put up about 6 weeks ago, these have really flushed out. And so I'm really happy with how they're turning out. So now on the back wall we have some tomato plants here. A few different varieties. The ones that I feel that are doing the best are the cherry tomatoes. Here are some cherry tomatoes that are a few days from being ready to be totally ripe. And one tip that I'd like to feature here is you might notice that a lot of these plants have the leaves cut off of the bottom half of the plant itself. The reason why I did that was to stimulate growth at the top of the plant so they'd grow taller. And actually I've heard that this slightly stresses the plant out to produce more fruit sets. So you can see some lovely fruit sets here. And I actually started these in the greenhouse, DC Smith greenhouse, the first week of March. So I grew those on until about mid-May, and then I had them out here, and now they're just absolutely growing. It's like a jungle out here, and pretty hard to manage at times. If I'm not here every day working in the garden, they can often kind of get out of hand. And so on the back right of the tomatoes, we have some tomatillos. And I've actually had a lot of questions about these. Not many people know what they are. They're pretty much a Mexican tomato, and you will see these used for salsa verdes. That's like the most popular usage, but I actually like to put them in my salads because they're pretty sweet, and they have a kind of a tart taste to them. So here's the tomatoes here growing right next to it. It's getting pretty crowded. So moving on, we're gonna go to the left side of my edible garden. We have another bed full of the Aurora peppers. Oh, and then we actually have a habanero pepper here. Let me get out of the sun. I don't want to shade these guys, but you can see these here. Now, do I plan on eating these? Probably not. I'm pretty bad with the spicy. I'm pretty sensitive, but I'm sure those will go into a few salsas if anyone can take the heat. Once again, we have tomatoes here. I believe this larger tomato variety is called Sheboygan. Now, a big problem that I see is people overwatering their tomatoes, which I've actually been subject to as well at times. Big rains followed by excessive watering can actually lead to cracking. And that is simply the top of the plant having these cracks in them, and that can lead to disease or hyperhydricity, in which it can lead to mold. So you want to keep an eye on that and possibly remove any tomatoes that look like they're too far gone. So to the left here we have peas. The reason why these are so small is, once again, the rabbits have been quite chaotic. They love the peas, and they will just munch on these every day. So I had to put up more fencing. And then sprawling over that bed is actually one of the better growing vegetables in my garden, which is the cucumbers. Let me get a zoom in on here. You can see that growing. I love the nice yellow flowers here with the cukes. So these grow really fast. I picked a pickling variety in which I've been making pickles out of, and I will be sharing that pickle recipe in the next Allen Centennial blog post. In this next bed, I planted some dill, but unfortunately the soil quality of this particular bed has been very poor. So that might actually need top dressing of some organic soil matter, and I think that will help stimulate germination. If you have this problem, some people like to overwater and keep watering until they think that the problem will be solved, but actually that can create soil that's even in worse condition. It becomes powdery, it becomes, yeah, you can see that it's moist, but there's small particles can lead to a lack of oxygen, and which will lead to a lack of germination. So it's been a learning process for me, as well as a challenge to grow different things in different beds that will be most optimum for germination and production. So I wanted to go back quickly on the cucumbers. We actually have some powdery mildew. It's that white spottedness on the leaves. Now, it's not too bad of a disease. This is actually a fungus or a water mold. I can't remember if it's a true mold. I'm sure some of my plant pathology friends will get mad at me for this one. But this is actually not a huge problem. It happens when there's over moisture, or like high amounts of moisture, heavy rainfall, or lack of airflow at the bottom of the canopy. For these cukes, I tried training them up so they have a little more airflow, and you actually see little to no powdery mildew at the top of the canopy, but you'd expect, because the relative moisture at the bottom is so much higher, that we'll have a higher prevalence of the powdery mildew, and we do see that at the lower leaves. Like I said, these are pickling cucumbers, but I've also used them to cut them into cubes and use them as one of the main greens in a Greek salad, in which I will also feature on the Allen Centennial blog post. So look out for those if you're looking for some nice healthy snacks to be made out of some plant material. All right, so next we have borage here. This one is not as well known. I thought it was so interesting because you can actually go in and the flowers themselves are edible. You can see a nice honeybee enjoying the flower. Well, it actually melts in your mouth and it tastes simply like a cucumber. It's very refreshing. I'm gonna nibble on one right now. It's got an interesting texture, so I think it's a cool thing to add to a salad such as the Greek one that I just mentioned. And then on the left of that we have some lettuce that just germinated, and you can see that the first signs of germination, you'll get these long leaves, but those are actually not the true leaves. The true leaves are these larger ones. Ooh, let me see. These larger ones, which I'm sure you recognize to be more looking like a lettuce leaf or something similar like a spinach. So yeah, I've been at this garden since I would say mid-April, and I wanted to make a blog post right about now because of how good everything's looking. Another quick thing to mention is the barrier that we've used here is like a natural barrier. We've used dogwood, which is a popular shrub in Wisconsin, and we actually see a lot of growth flush coming out of the dogwood itself. So this was a hardwood or a semi-hardwood cutting, I guess you could say, since we see some green from the cutting itself. And if you plant that in the ground and if you water it at all, you'll actually see a lot of growth flush come out of that, and that's the plant responding and wanting to make some new growth for itself. It's quite a cool thing. We've actually used these in our containers as well to add a little bit of green, and they're very malleable, very bendy. And so you can actually make quite a few different things out of the dogwood, and there's some more right here that has grown out quite a bit. So as far as fertilizers and nutrients, we grow completely organic here at the gardens for the most part. If there's any like serious weed problems, then we might such as some bindweed. We've had problems in our conifer garden. We will treat for that, but otherwise we are 100% organic. I mentioned I grew the tomatoes in the greenhouse earlier in March, and I did use a organic fertilizer for that. It was called, I believe, algae grow, and it was a relatively low nutrient content. The NPK was 555. If you understand that, that's the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium ratio of nutrients. But overall, I've seen the growth to be quite strong, and you actually don't really need that to have a successful harvest. And I will end it there, but we do have vegetables. Every few days I'll harvest some vegetables and showcase them at the Allen Centennial Garden terrace for people to come by and pick them up. So with that, this was Pete, Hort Intern at Allen Centennial Garden. If you are interested and you're a student here, interested in pursuing plant sciences, landscape architecture, or anything really STEM related, I think this is a great experience to get your hands dirty, but also learn a lot of different things about plants and have exposure to plants, as well as the community and how it impacts the community. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, you can hit up the Allen Centennial Garden page, talk to Ben Fuda, our director at the gardens, and he would be happy to answer any questions that you have. So this was Pete again, Hort Intern, and I hope you guys have a great Friday. Thanks, bye.